Planning Teaching and Learning Activities, Course Design Essentials from the Columbia University Center for Teaching and Learning. Welcome to this video series on course design. What you will learn here will help you design or redesign a course for your teaching context and mode of delivery. This video presents teaching approaches and strategies to engage students and reflection questions to guide your planning. Let's begin by revisiting the common course design process that was mentioned in the Course Design Getting Started video. In this content-centered approach, course content and readings are identified, and then lectures and activities are planned. However, now that your course design or redesign has been planned backward and has clearly articulated learning objectives and an assessment approach in place, these will guide decisions about teaching and learning activities. Recall that the third stage of the backward design framework is to plan learning experiences and instruction. That is, what will take place in class and outside of class to promote learning and help students achieve the desired results. In this stage, we align the activities and instruction with the learning objectives. The planned teaching and learning experiences will prepare students for the summative assessments of the course, which were determined in Stage 2. Here we ask ourselves, what activities will equip students with the needed knowledge and skills to do well on the assessments and achieve the learning objectives? What will need to be taught, and how should it best be taught? What materials and resources are best suited to accomplish the goals? Similarly, in Fink's framework for integrated course design, instructors intentionally plan teaching and learning activities that align with course goals and prepare students for assessments. As we plan teaching and learning activities, it is important to consider the distinction between passive and active learning. Let's take a closer look at each approach. For passive learning, students are receiving information and ideas. In this traditional learning approach, course content is merely delivered to students. They are not active in the learning process. This may take the form of students passively listening to an expert lecture, or passively reading assigned texts or watching a recorded lecture. Why limit ourselves to this traditional approach if our focus is on student learning? Just because an instructor covers the material does not mean that students will learn it. In fact, those that research how learning works indicate otherwise. In learner-centered teaching, 5 Key Changes to Practice, Weimer reminds us that the hard and messy work of learning can be done only by students. Therefore, engaging students as much as possible in the learning process is essential. Instructors can create structures to help students listen actively to lectures, read texts actively, and watch videos more actively through planned teaching and learning activities, as we will explore in this video. A few resources that provide strategies informed by the science of learning include Interactive Lecturing, a handbook for college faculty by Barkley and Major, Dynamic Lecturing, research-based strategies to enhance lecture effectiveness by Harrington and Zakrysic, and Hitting Pause, 65 lecture breaks to refresh and reinforce learning by Rice. Overhauling one's instructional approach can feel overwhelming. However, Lang and Darby suggest small changes to teaching that have big learning payoffs. For instance, Lang encourages instructors to think about how they might use class time effectively to engage students and maximize learning. Whether before class starts, as students trickle in, an instructor might project a course-related question, image, headline, or problem for students to ponder. The opening 5 minutes of class is a great opportunity to ask students to retrieve their prior learning, rather than the instructor giving a summary. Mid-class, pause and ask students to connect what they are learning and find examples. And the last 5 minutes of class is an opportunity for students to reflect on what they learned during the class session. Learn more in Small Teaching Everyday Lessons from the Science of Learning by Lang and its application to the online context in Small Teaching Online, Applying Learning Science in Online Classes by Darby and Lang. Making the small changes discussed are ways to get students more engaged. Bonwell and Eisen describe active learning as instructional activities involving students in things and thinking about what they are doing. Building on Bonwell and Eisen's definition, Fink considers active learning to involve students in doing or observing and reflecting. Fink proposes a holistic view of active learning, one that includes students being introduced to information and ideas or course content, engaging in rich learning experiences, whether actual or simulated, and reflective dialogue on what and how of learning, whether through writing individually or in discussion with others. Through Fink's model, instructors provide students with opportunities both inside and outside the classroom to explore course content, apply knowledge and skills, and reflect on the course subject and/or their learning process. These 3 types of activities can build on each other to create a richer learning experience for students. How do we implement Fink's holistic view of active learning? Fink suggests 3 strategies: create rich learning experiences, find new ways to introduce content, and promote reflection on the learning process. Next, we will explore each of these strategies in more detail. According to Fink, the most powerful change that instructors can make to a course is to expand the experiential dimension of student learning, both inside and outside of the classroom. Here we ask ourselves, what can students do or observe that will allow them to experience the subject in a meaningful way? There are many active learning strategies that instructors can use for both small and large courses that allow students to develop and practice their knowledge and skills. These may include small group discussion, case study discussion, responding to and discussing poll questions, collaborative problem solving, role play, simulation, peer review, field trips, or virtual visits. Learners can also watch or listen to someone else doing something related to what they are learning. Examples may include observing a demo, such as their instructor solving a problem out loud and walking through every step of their thinking, or going line by line, showing how an instructor might read a difficult text, or observing the phenomena being studied. In selecting the appropriate active learning strategy, it is important to think of the learning objectives and then have students do what you want them to learn to do. For instance, critique an argument or piece of writing in the humanities, or design and conduct an experiment in the sciences or social sciences. Find ideas for ways to engage your students in the books Student Engagement Techniques, a Handbook for College Faculty by Barkley, Collaborative Learning Techniques, a Handbook for College Faculty by Barkley, Major and Cross, and Discussion in the College Classroom, Getting Your Students Engaged and Participating in Person and Online by Howard. Fink's second strategy encourages instructors to find new ways to introduce content. Here we ask ourselves, other than lecture, in what ways can students get their initial exposure to course content? This involves exploring alternate ways to introduce key information and ideas, and freeing up class time, whether in person or online, for active learning and reflective activities. Students may be asked to read various text sources before they come to class, watch a short recorded lecture, listen to a podcast, or explore a module in CourseWorks that curates open educational resources. The final strategy for implementing Fink's holistic view of active learning is to develop students' metacognitive skills, that is, thinking about their thinking. It cannot be assumed that students think about what and how they are learning from the activities, assignments, or discussions in a course. Providing structured opportunities for students to reflect on their own understanding enhances their learning, makes them more self-aware, and allows them to make meaning for themselves. Students may reflect individually through writing activities such as journals, portfolios, or with others through reflective dialogue with peers and/or the instructor. One simple strategy that does not take a lot of time but allows students to reflect on and self-assess their understanding is known as a 1-minute paper. Following a class session, activity, assignment, or module, students answer one of the following questions in writing. What was the most important thing you learned? What important question remains unanswered? What was the muddiest point in the lecture, the homework assignment, the reading, the film? With your articulated learning objectives in mind and your assessment approach determined, what learning objectives and instruction will you plan for to equip your students with the needed knowledge and skills? Let's recap. Learning activities should align with learning objectives. Instruction and activities prepare students for summative assessments. Plan for active learning. Include activities from each category of Fink's holistic view: getting information and ideas, doing or observing activities, and reflection activities. Identify the resources and instruction that are needed. Determine which activities will occur in class and which will occur out of class, and how everything fits together. This concludes planning, teaching, and learning activities. Please view the other videos to explore each stage of course design in more detail. For course design or redesign assistance and other teaching and learning support, please contact the CTL at columbiactl@columbia.edu.